Good morning everybody, and welcome back to another weekly recap. In all likeliness, this will be the last weekly recap of 2020. It's been a pretty crazy year, obviously, but looking forward to 2021, we have a lot to look forward to. Now just this week we got new information on the Kingdom Divided quest, which is going to include probably one of the biggest reworks to kourend. This will involve completely reworking the Arceuus Spellbook, as well as adding in a new quest, new mechanics, new items, and a ton more. As always, we'll also be going over anything else interesting in the old school RuneScape community this week. If you find these recaps useful, I always appreciate it if you leave the video a like. It does help my video get recommended to other people so they can keep up with the news as well. Anyway guys, let's get started. Now let's begin here with the Kingdom Divided quest. Now originally when I heard about this, I didn't think it would be much more than maybe a medium to hard level quest that was located in kourend. However, it turns out it's going to be much more than that. The Kingdom Divided quest is going to be coming with one of the biggest reworks to kourend, which is going to be the Arceuus Spellbook rework, as well as a complete redesign of the Chazy area. So it's actually going to be a huge update, and they are proposing a bunch of new mechanics that we haven't ever seen before. Now in its current state, the Arceuus Spellbook isn't used for much. It's very bloated, and mainly people only use it for teleports and the reanimate spell. Now for the most part, none of the original functionality is going away. However, they are going to be condensing a bunch of things together to make more room for additional spells. Now to start off here with the actual Kingdom Divided quest, they haven't actually said what the difficulty is, but I'm guessing just based on the requirements, it's going to be probably a master level quest. The requirements are 54 agility, 52 thieving, 52 woodcutting, 50 herb lore, 42 mining, 38 crafting, and 35 magic. The reward is going to be 2 quest points, 10,000 experience in a skill of your choosing, of course access to the new Arceuus Spellbook, a kourend castle respawn point, and 20 additional charges in the KRS memoir. It also requires completion of pretty much all of the other kourend quest lines, so this is going to be definitely the most difficult and most rewarding quest in kourend. Now the new Arceuus Spellbook is primarily going to be focused on PVM, but also has sprinkles of PvP functionality in there, as well as utility with additional teleports. Now, the original reanimation spells are not going anywhere, however they have now been condensed into only 4 separate spells. For example, now goblins, monkeys, imps, minotaurs, scorpions, bears, and unicorns are all under the umbrella of basic reanimation. Dogs, chaos druids, ogres, giants, elves, trolls, and horrors are all under adept reanimation. We have Calphites, Dagonoths, Bloodvelds, Tazar, and demons all under expert reanimation. And finally we have Avianzes, abyssal creatures, and dragons under master reanimation. Now as far as I'm aware, the experience for each individual monster is still going to be different, however the cost is going to be standardized, and realistically this was changed just to make more room on the spellbook. Now as far as the teleport spells go, they're only going to be making one change, and that is to the Lumbridge Graveyard teleport. That would now be replaced with the Library of Arceuus teleport, which would put you a little bit north of the Grand Library in Arceuus. Now like I mentioned earlier, the Arceuus Spellbook is going to introduce a bunch of new mechanics. Now one of those is something called Corruption. Now Corruption is kind of a debuff, and it can be applied by a few different spells in the new rework. Now essentially Corruption will drain your opponent of their prayer points slowly at first, and then will increase over time. Now the other big mechanic that they're introducing is something called Resurrection. Now Resurrection would allow you to resurrect a monster that you kill to aid you in battle. Now this would not work in PvP and would mainly just be a helpful follower for your PVM escapades. To perform any of the resurrection spells, you're going to need a new item called the Book of the Dead. You would get the book automatically for completing a Kingdom Divided, so it would be pretty easy to obtain, but would require you to equip it at all times to use the resurrection spells. Now the resurrection spells would, as normal, cost you runes, but on top of that, they would also cost you prayer points. Now that is an additional mechanic they're adding into a couple of different spells on the Arceuus Spellbook. Now next up here we have an in-depth description of all of the different spells on the new Spellbook rework, and we're starting here at the lowest level to cast, and that would be Ghostly Grasp. Essentially this is just a very low damage spell that has a 10% chance to stop the enemy from moving for 2 game cycles, or 1.2 seconds. Essentially just a very short stun. Now coming up next here is the very first resurrection spell called Resurrect Ghost. Now the way this would work is after you kill a monster, you would be able to resurrect a ghost. They wouldn't actually have to be killing ghosts, for example, because who is doing that? To be able to resurrect a ghost, but you would have to kill something. Now I do still find this to be a little bit underwhelming. The Resurrect Ghost has a max hit of 1, and of course would require you to take the Book of the Dead with you, either equipping it in your offhand slot or keeping it in your inventory to equip whenever you kill something. Now you can only have one minion or thrall active at a time, so you obviously can't have like 50 ghosts going around at once. I mean, we'll see what the highest level resurrection looks like, but I wouldn't foresee myself using this too much. Okay, so next up here we have a Demon Bane spell. There's a couple of these, and the lowest level one would require level 44 magic, and would have a base hit of 16. Now uniquely, this spell would only work on demonic foes, it wouldn't have any base damage against anything else. Now next up here we have a utility spell which I find really interesting called Shadow Veil. Now when you activate it, it would give you a 15% chance to avoid being stunned and damaged whenever you pickpocket an NPC. The spell would remain active for 1 game cycle per magic level that you have, so at 99 magic it would remain active for about a minute. Now what's really important though is this does actually stack with the Dodgy Necklace, giving you a total of a 40% chance to avoid being stunned whenever you're pickpocketing. This actually seems like a really good utility spell and probably will be a fairly significant buff to pickpocketing. Now next up here we have another utility spell called Dark Lure. Now what it does is it prevents creatures from running away. Now to give the examples such as imps, unicorns, ghouls, and other implings. Now the only place I personally could see this being useful is the giant mole, but I kind of doubt it's going to work there. Otherwise that kind of entirely devalues the Falador Hard Diary. Now obviously not every spell has to have a defined meta use, something might come up for it in the future, so we'll just leave that. Now next up here we have Skeletal Grasp, which will be an upgraded version of the Ghostly Grasp. It is a damaging spell that has a 25% chance to stop your enemy from moving for 2 game cycles, or 1.2 seconds. Next up here, level 57 magic, we have Resurrect Skeleton. Again, it works in the exact same way as Resurrect Ghost would, except this time it has a max hit of 2. Still, I would say fairly weak. Now at 59 magic, we have a really interesting one, and that is Mark of Darkness. Now essentially, all this does is add in extra buffs for the other spells in the spellbook. So whenever you cast a Mark of Darkness on the enemy, it will give them the following debuffs. Now the Corruption effect, which again was the thing that drains your prayer, will occur twice as often. Any of the grasping spells, which are the things that stun you, will be twice as effective, so I'm assuming you'll get stunned for twice as long. And the Demon Bane spells will have an additional 25% damage and accuracy, assuming the monster has been marked. Okay, next up here we have another Demon Bane spell, and that would be Superior Demon Bane. Again, this would just be a damage spell that only works against demonic foes. It would have a max base hit of 23. Now next up here we have something called Lesser Corruption. This spell would give you a 1 in 3 chance of inflicting corruption on your target with your next damaging hit. So it looks like you have to cast Lesser Corruption and then cast a damaging ability. However, 1 in 3 is kind of low. Next up here we have something called Vile Vigor. This one is pretty interesting to me. I can perhaps think of a couple interesting uses for this. Now what it does is it allows you to convert all of your prayer points into run energy. Now I think there could be circumstances where this might be useful. For example, if there is easy access to an altar, you could heal your prayer, convert that all into run energy, and continue onwards. I do expect that players will probably find a use for this. Now next up here we have another utility spell, and that's called Cleanse. Now Cleanse will clean all of the herbs in your inventory, giving half of the herb lore experience that would normally be given. The cast animation will also take about 3 seconds to complete. Now this one could be incredibly good and most likely is going to make cleaning herbs not profitable anymore. Just for an example, for cleaning an inventory of Torso, that would give you 202 herb lore experience all from one cast. Just from a rough calculation, that could equate to maybe 200k to even up to 250k herb lore experience per hour, which is going to be really good because you're also going to be getting magic experience as well, so I will definitely be trying this out. Now next up here we have something called the Ward of Arceuus. Now this is going to give yourself a buff which will give you immunity to corruption. Grasp spells will only last for 1 game tick. Something that's kind of interesting here is damage from enemy demonic foes is reduced by 10%. This would work even on bosses, for example, Zami. That there is actually potentially very useful. A 10% damage reduction from Zamorak is pretty huge. Next up here we have Resurrect Zombie, still only rocking a max hit of 3. Now finally here we have the strongest level Grasp spell, which has a 50% chance to stun you for 2.4 seconds, max hit 24. Now another really interesting mechanic is a spell called Death Charge. Now if you use Death Charge on an enemy, when you kill it, you will get 15% of your special attack energy back. Now that sounds really overpowered, but there is a big bottleneck on it. You can only use it once every minute. I do still think this could be pretty useful, but it might be a little more niche than if you could do it more often. Now the final damage spell is Dark Demon Bane, another Demon Bane spell that has a base hit of 30. Now in the end, where are Demon Bane spells going to be useful? Well, maybe the Abyssal Sire, maybe the Zamorak minions, but a lot of high level demons also have very high magic defense, so it's a little unclear to me at this point where you'd be using these spells mostly. Now the next spell here is something called Demonic Offering and would be one of the highest level utility spells on the Arceuus Spellbook. Now to go along with that spell, they want to replace some of the existing Ash drop with new Demonic Ashes. This would allow you to scatter them, which would be very similar to burying them, for a base amount of experience. For example, Fiendish Ashes would be pretty much the exact same as Standard Bones, scaling all the way up to Infernal Ashes, which would be the same as Hydra Bones. Now the Demonic Offering spell would be very useful because it would allow you to convert 3 piles of Demonic Ashes in your inventory into prayer points, so it would help you restore prayer, in addition to granting 3 times the base prayer experience for that as well. So for example, if you were killing Zamorak and you got 3 Infernal Ashes in your inventory, you could use the Demonic Offering spell to convert each one of them into 330 prayer experience, and you would also get 6 prayer points. A really interesting mechanic, and I could definitely see myself using that at Cerberus. That's just a bunch of free prayer experience, and also helps extend your trips. Okay, we're almost done here. The second to last spell would be Greater Corruption, just a straight up stronger version of Lesser Corruption, and would allow you to get a 66% chance of inflicting corruption on your next damaging ability. And the final spell, which would be unlocked at level 92, would be called Sinister Offering. Now Sinister Offering would allow you to convert 3 sets of bones into prayer points. In addition to giving you prayer points, it would also give you 3 times the base prayer experience from burying them. Again, to me that sounds very strong and would be an interesting magic and prayer combination training method. The main bottleneck here is you can only do 1 cast every 3 seconds, but I could still foresee this being incredibly useful. So that is it for all of the Arceuus Spellbook, and in my opinion, the utility spells by and large seem to be the most useful. I mean, there definitely could be some applications for the resurrection spells, PvP spells, the Demon Bane spells, etc. But by and large, I think the utility is mainly what I'm going to be using it for. Regardless though, there are some really interesting ideas in here and I'm extremely excited to try it out. Okay, so finally here we have the Chazy in-house rework. Now mainly this is just going to be a usability, quality of life, and visual change. So beyond a major visual redesign and a few extra monsters added in to give a little more life to the area, not too much is fundamentally changing. Now with that said though, there are a few new pieces of content being added in. First up here we have the Chazy Agility course. This would be a very low level agility course that would unlock at level 5. It would be broken into 2 sections. One unlocked at level 5 would give you 8,500 agility experience per hour, and the second course would be unlocked at level 48 and would provide up to 30,000 agility experience per hour. Fairly competitive, and I think it would add in a lot more life to the area if there was actually more legitimate training methods for skills like agility. Now in addition to that, they're going to be added in a bunch of new mobs scattered throughout the area. Some of them are existing ones, but now we're going to get a new monster called a boar, level 5. We're also going to get the Necromancer, which is going to be level 54, which will be a magic-based monster, which will use some of the new Arceuus Spellbook against you. And finally here we'd have the new Undead Lizardman. It would essentially be a low-level lizard that would give you access to Lizardman fangs, however it would not give you any favor towards kourend. Oh man, so that is it. A lot to go over, but I'm really excited for it, and I am hoping we can get it maybe in the first half of 2021. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for this week's weekly recap. Thanks for watching. I will see you in 2021 with hopefully some exciting new content. Now before I go here, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. One of my newest members, Zayul, just joined the Dragon tier, which is totally crazy. They are joining James Luft, Brad Sings, Ocelot, and Kush Patel, all at the Dragon tier. Again, thank you guys so much. And also a huge thank you to Birdbot and Basetitch. As always, if you guys are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do so. It gives me some consistent income. In return, you could be immortalized into my videos, get access to a custom Discord member role, and access to my video release schedule. Anyway guys, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.